All right, everybody, welcome back into Cherry Picking Week 18 of the fantasy hockey season. Today's episode, must add, a little bit of a different must add. Coming off the All-Star break, this week we're looking at probably just teams that are playing the most games. So two teams I'm going to be pointing out today are the Edmonton Oilers and Seattle Kraken. So I'm going to be telling you two guys to pick on both of those teams this week. That'll be very advantageous to your fantasy hockey teams. Also, if you're playing an NHL DFS, this video will be very helpful. And if you haven't signed up at OWNERSBOX, those links will be in the description below. If you're new to OWNERSBOX and you sign up today, you can get a free entry into a DFS contest and then also a free entry into our new game, Lightning Lineups, which is the most electric way to play DFS too, especially NHL DFS. So let's get into it. The first player on the Kraken is Yanni Gourde. Centers, one of the better lines on the Seattle Kraken right now, and a common theme, as I mentioned before, all these teams, the Seattle Kraken, all the players on these teams, are playing 4 games this week. So I'm finding the best value necessary, I guess, and Yanni Gourde is the first pick for me because, as I mentioned, this line that he's playing on right now has been playing a lot better. One of the top lines on the Kraken over the last 10 games before the All-Star break. The Kraken are starting a road trip right now, starting on the East Coast. They're going over to New York to play their first game, and then they have the Rangers, Devils, and the Flyers. A little bit of a gauntlet, you might think, but a lot of these teams actually are struggling a little bit more defensively. I'll get into that a little bit later on in the video. So Gourde has been a top contributor prior to the All-Star break. He has 7 points in his last 10 games. Not really a goal scorer by any means, but he has great playmaking abilities, and he plays on the line right now with Eli Tolvanen, who has an absolute cannon. They picked him up off of waivers from Nashville, and he's been a great addition to this Seattle team. And then also Oliver Bjorkstrand, who we also get in a little bit later on in this video. He's consistently playing 18 minutes right now over his last 8 games. A lot of the teams they are playing are weaker against centers too, so that's something that you can definitely think about when picking up Gourde. He's a good add in bangers leagues too. He has 70 hits this season, which is tops among forwards on the Seattle Kraken. And in 48 games, he has 6 goals, 32 assists, 71 hits, 82 shots, and just under 17 minutes of ice time per game. So we're seeing a little bit of elevation of play from Yanni Gourde recently, and I think he's a really good add this week. Definitely considering of his volume and just how he's been playing. I think he'll be well rested after this All-Star break. All right, so the first guy I'm going to be telling to pick up on the Edmonton Oilers is Ryan McLeod. As I mentioned, they play 4 games this week. They have a much easier schedule, I would say, than Seattle, but still they're looking at Detroit, Philadelphia, Ottawa, and then Montreal. And obviously I can't tell you to pick up McDavid or Ryan Nugent-Hopkins or anyone like that, so we're going to go a little bit deeper here, but it does seem like Jay Woodcroft is starting to evolve a lot more players in the offense. It's not just McDavid and Draisaitl you're seeing recently. There's other guys too. One of those guys being Ryan McLeod. Look at his last 10 games. He has 5 goals and 1 assist, plays in all situations, really bounces around from the 3rd or 4th line. Woodcroft really extended this kid's leash at just 23 years old. He's already starting to play, he's more of a grinder role, but he's already starting to play with McDavid and Draisaitl at certain situations in the game as well. He centers the second power play line right now, and he's also on the first penalty kill with Connor McDavid. So for a guy who is also he has this grinder label on him ever since he's entered the league. He creates a lot of scoring opportunities for himself. He's the 3rd best expected goals for and 5-on-5 on this Oilers team over the last 10 games. And we've seen that translate to actual goals with 5 actual goals that we've seen. So he takes his opportunities on the power play as well. When he gets them, and they're playing really poor disciplined teams this week. Looking at Ottawa, looking at Montreal, 2 teams that really just get in the penalty box a lot, take a lot of penalties. Montreal too, speaking of just poorly disciplined teams, they give up the most defensive zone giveaways too this year, so that's something that the Oilers will definitely be able to take advantage of. Montreal also gives up the most shorthanded goals this season, so there's a lot of situations here where I could see Ryan McLeod succeeding this week. One of them is the matchups, and then also just the volume and the ice time he's been playing recently. So Ryan McLeod, even though he's 1% roster, definitely a guy I'd be looking to picking up this week. Definitely a guy I'd be streaming this week. All right, so the other guy we're going to be picking up this week that's on the Seattle Kraken, I mentioned him earlier when I was talking about Yanni Gourde, and that's Oliver Bjorkstrand. So just looking at his season stats so far, a little underwhelming considering what we saw from him last year. 49 games played, is 9 goals, 17 assists, just a couple power play points too. But this is one guy who I look at who's great analytically. He just can't convert for whatever reason this year. He has a very high expected goals for rate, just hasn't been able to translate on the ice for whatever reason. But compared to last year, we saw him almost score 30 goals. He had a career high in points as well. But before the All-Star break, we finally started to see his shot volume come up, which started to translate to actual points, him putting the puck in the net, which is great to see. 8 points in his last 10 games, and that includes 3 goals as well. Another guy that I would think about picking up at this point too is Eli Tolvanen. Tolvanen. I mentioned that this line's been playing really well, probably the best offensive line we've seen on the Kraken for the last 10 days, or 10 games, excuse me, but his volume is a little bit concerning, so I think I'd really trust a Bjorkstrand and Gourde stack, especially in DFS if you can this week, and then also on your fantasy team, I think that's a pretty good play. If these guys can combine for 4 points each, I mentioned the fact that Yanni Gourde can also contribute on the banger side of it. Oliver Bjorkstrand a little bit less, but he'll contribute with his shot volume as well. You know, a guy that's usually around 3 shots per game. Both of these guys also over the last 10 games with the Kraken lead the team in expected goals for. And just looking at the matchups that they're playing, it might seem like a little daunting, but the Rangers haven't been that great at home this year. The Devils' defense has not been the same that we saw at the beginning of the year. The Flyers are the Flyers. They allow a ton of shots and scoring opportunities, and I still don't really believe in this Isles team. So really don't sleep on these Seattle Kraken players this week. I think they'd be a huge value add for a lot of fantasy hockey teams. All right, so the last guy that we're looking at this week, he's 0% rostered, but looking at this Oilers team, they've been so good offensively that's hard to ignore, even the guys that are further down on the depth chart, and that's Mattias Janmark. 34 games played this year. He only has 4 goals, 9 assists, 12 blocked shots, 45 shots, and playing just under 16 minutes per game. But over his last 8 games, we're looking at a guy with 1 goal, 5 points. Most recently playing on a line with Ryan Sura, which is the biggest factor for me. It seems like he's definitely starting to play in a lot more situations as well. And over that same time frame, he's 5th in expected goals for and 5th in high danger chances. He's actually creating more high danger chances over the last 10 games than guys like Leon Draisaitl and even Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, which leads me to believe that these two guys are actually playing really well together on this line. And the offense for the Oilers, it's showing that on paper. They average like 4 goals per game before the All-Star break. So this offense has been really rolling. It's not just coming from McDavid and Leon Draisaitl either. We're seeing Mattias Janmark and some other guys really contribute on the offensive end. And then looking at the matchups this week too, I'd look for Janmark to be really useful in that Montreal matchup. As a true winger, a guy who really stretches the ice, uses his speed a lot. I think Montreal will struggle. They've allowed the most scoring opportunities and shots against two wingers so far this season. And I mentioned the fact that their defense give a ton of turnovers in their own zone, a really young core. So I feel like he'll be able to exploit that along with some of the other teams that they're playing this week. And the fact that these teams are definitely lesser competition, I would say that there's a good chance that these guys are going to be playing later on in situations if there is a blowout in any of these games. So that adds just more shots, hits, potentially any garbage time goals or an empty net goal as well. So these guys are definitely guys I'd be looking at this week. All right, thank you guys for tuning in. That's it for Must Add this week. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Join the Discord if you haven't already. I'd love to know who else you guys are picking up this week and great value adds this week. So I will see you guys in the next video.